Hello, and welcome to Informatically Speaking, a Greater Delaware Valley ANIA podcast designed to promote knowledge sharing in the field of nursing informatics, locally, nationally, and globally within our unique industry. At GDV ANIA, we are committed to providing opportunities for professional development with the goal of advancing nursing informatics practice. I'm your host, Constance McLaughlin. Welcome back to our series on influencing behaviors. And Bruce Wilson, thanks for coming back.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So last time we talked about having the capacity and the ability to influence behaviors in ourselves and in others' lives. And we also talked about helping others to have a new brain and a systematic way of solving influencer challenges. So this that small little recap, and now we have this next podcast coming up. I'm excited to see what we're going to talk about.
Well, I'm excited to be here, as I said before, and also for the conversation. Thanks for teeing it up. You know, everything you recapped or recited is accurate, and it got me thinking. To add a little bit of clarity to it, one of the most important powers we have as humans is our ability to influence behaviors in ourselves and others, and that's and maybe in power isn't the right word. Maybe it's capacity. I'd say capacity is probably the better word. And we're really going to build on that today. We're going to build on, okay, how do we take that statement and that idea and move it into a model, and how do we start to learn to apply it? So again, if you haven't tuned in from the last podcast, I would encourage you to do so. It'll get you caught up for this podcast, but also to recite the tools, and you can follow along. Again, this is the influencer content that can be found at cruciallearning.com, and you can find all of the tools and resources and visual aids along with this podcast. So let me dive in, Constance, if I could, and let me give you a little bit of science. Do you like science?
I love science. Well, I'm a nurse. Come on.
Okay. Well, this is social. This is social science, not biology.
That's
But
okay. I'll take
so
it.
the interesting thing is, again, I mentioned last time I'm certified to teach this course, and I think it's fantastic. They've done a ton of research, and their claim is that they have the latest or the best of what social science has to offer in this model. And I would tell you that I think that they're pretty accurate. And one of the things that I'm going to say that pretty is like there's a doubt, meaning there's just social science is always evolving. So they have some really sound content in here, and it's based on some very, very good social science theories. And one of those theories, which is called nudge theory, some folks may be familiar with that. It's you can find it in Richard Thaler's book, and Richard Thaler is a professor from the Chicago School of Business. He's a Nobel Prize winner in economics. And nudge theory, basically, the scientific name for that is libertarian paternalism. But what that really means is, libertarian paternalism. I think I said that right. But what that really means is we want to think of it as if you're a parent, you could relate to this statement. I want to offer choice to my kid, but I want to persuade them or nudge them to make the better choice, but I still want the choice to be theirs. And in the clinical environment, as we work with highly educated folks, people that are in high impact positions, positions of authority, or positions of significant responsibility, they want to make those decisions. And so we want to respect that, and they should make those decisions, but we also want to try to influence the right decision, or maybe the better decision. And so that's really what this model is all about. So we need to think about, well, what is the framework we use to do that today? And this model is really kind of a way, as I mentioned last time, a way to change your thinking. And one of the things you want to start with first when we look at our model is we read from left to right. And that's a stated fact. You're like, okay, well, I should say the English language reads from left to right. Not all languages read from left to right. However, this model actually works or reads from right to left. So for everybody listening, if you're taking notes, maybe on a piece of paper, what I'd like you to do is just kind of draw a big circle, and in that circle, I want you to write the words clarified measurable result. And so we're going to start there, and I'm going to pause there and kind of tell everybody listening that you know. There are three things that influencers do. And if after today, after this podcast, you'll be able to identify what are those three things. And if you'll do those three things, you will dramatically improve your capacity to influence, as I said before, your own behavior and the behaviors in others. So I'm going to start with an example, Constance. And my question to you is, as we get to those three things, have you ever heard of the 100,000 Lives campaign?
I have actually, yes.
Tell me what you know about that.
Well, not a huge amount. It's been quite a while since I remember it, but I do remember a video about it, and it was a physician, and I believe he was a CEO or head of something in this organization, and realized that there had to be a way to make an impact on lives. So they were looking at these data statistics around medical errors, and there had to be a better way. And then he put a program together basically to save 100,000 lives.
Yeah,
That's what I
that's
know.
yeah, that's a pretty accurate and good summation. I'll put a little bit of clarity to that, but let me ask you this intriguing question. Uh, as a matter of curiosity and interest for our readers, you mentioned medical errors. How many medical errors do you think occur annually in the U.S. healthcare system?
Oh my gosh.
And let me say it a different way. How many Americans die per year due to medical error in the United States?
How about a quarter of a million?
Pretty close. So the depending on the study you look at and what you classify as a medical error, it's the numbers anywhere between 240K to up to 400,000. It really just depends on what you qualify as a medical error, or classify might be a better word. So Don Berwick is actually this, to as your point, he's the CEO of IHI. So that's the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. It's another great website for anybody that's in healthcare. I would encourage you to go out there. They have all kinds of great courses, research, just connecting to other healthcare venues, and it's a really great source of information, and what I would call non-biased content. Anyway, so Berwick set out and he basically said, "Hey, look, roughly 250,000 people per year die due to medical errors, and we want to try to reduce those by 100. Let's pick a number, 100,000, and then we need to find a time to do it. And so they arbitrarily picked 18 months. And the interesting thing about the study with Berwick and what happened with him, for those that aren't familiar, haven't read the book or looked into the content, um, the he's one of many folks that the Vital Smarts or Crucial Learning Institution researched to say, hey, what are you doing that worked? And so one of Berwick's phrases that he would say is, some is not a number, soon is not a time. And what he was really saying is, we need to have, even though we just had this idea of how to change things, it doesn't become concrete and doesn't become something we can work towards until we put a date on it, right? It has to be specific. So
Right.
this is back to my circle. This is where we get what we call that clarified measurable result. And really, rule number one, I told you there are three things you need to do. So the first one is, you need to have a clarified measurable result. And you want to be like Berwick. Basically, some is not a number, soon is not a time. I need a date. So in his case, they took 100,000 lives. They said 18 months. And the net result, for those that aren't familiar with the study, is they actually, at the end of the study, they actually impacted and saved about 120,000 lives. So they overreached their goal. And it's a really compelling story. It's a really compelling case study for those that are interested in that kind of thing. But other than the case study, what I want you to remember as you're trying to figure out, well, how do I apply this? And how do I apply this model? Is you really need what what they call a clarified measurable result, what a lot of business people will call a SMART goal. And we're going to talk about in the next podcast, really diving deep into what that, how do you set up a SMART goal? What does that look like? What are the tools I use for that? But that's step number one. So let's talk about step number two. After you have a clarified measurable result, this is where things start to become really interesting. And Constance, I'm curious, in your line of work or in your personal life, have you ever seen a situation or somebody doing something and then assigned a what I would call a characteristic or a phrase? And this is a classic one. This might help you a little bit to answer your question, because I know my question, it seems a little nebulous. I would always, in my former role, I would always meet with lots of healthcare leaders across that globe, actually. And when I would meet with them, the vernacular, the word choices they would use, especially when I talked to them around instituting governance in their organization, it was they would use a lot of things, statements like, "Oh, I want my people to be more accountable," or "I want." They would use these generalizations or what I would call characteristics. Have you ever seen that before in maybe your organization or in your own life? Have you ever seen other humans behave in that way?
Yeah, all the time, because I think that we don't get as specific as we should be at exactly what you're talking about. People use those kinds of words all the time and generalize things because well, for probably a lot of reasons, but yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. And maybe it's just that they don't know how to set goals, right? I mean, I feel like there's sometimes I struggle with that as well.
Yeah. So rule number two, thank you, by the way. And I'm glad that other people can relate. But the key to rule number two is to realize, hey, don't think about terms in general terms or characteristics. Excuse me. I don't think that generalistics is a word.
I was wondering that myself, like,
yeah,
word.
characteristics. I think my tongue got a little tied there. But think of them in terms of behavior. And this is really what rule number two is all about. It's really flipping the switch in your mind and looking for that one or two, maybe three vital behaviors that if they are enacted, if those behaviors are enacted, then I get the result I want. And so I was working with a leader once, and the leader was just saying, gosh, we have these committees set up. You have committees there, your organization.
Yes.
Do you have people that attend them? Does everybody attend the committee meetings religiously and never miss, or do you have some people that miss?
Oh, people miss all the time.
Okay, people miss
Yeah.
all the time. So this particular leader was saying, "Man, I just want my people to be more accountable." And as I dug into it with her and I worked with her, I really said, "Hey, what I think you're really saying is you want your people to show up on time to the governance meeting and participate." And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, well, we need to work on those behaviors, not saying you need to be accountable to the governments or you need to be committed." I mean, some people, Constance, I don't know if you know this, but people throw out the word commitment all the time. And I always tell people, well, some people are just committed about as committed as a kamikaze pilot on his 39th mission, which isn't very committed. And so, we've all seen that person. And but it's a mental trap we fall into. So
Mm.
again, for those listening, take a pause when that happens and think, okay, I might be classifying or characterizing something, but what's the behavior? So that's rule number two. Rule number three is really what we call using sources of influence. So let me take a step back. I guess for the listeners, I need to pause. If you have your model and you have a circle, then next to that circle, a few inches apart, you might want to draw a big box that talks and just put in there vital behaviors. And again, these are the key, 1 to 3 behaviors that are enacted that will get you the results. And that's the other thing too, is influencers always start with results. And you notice I said in the circle, clarified, measurable results. And so we want to make sure that when we're talking about influencing behavior, and Constance, I know you're an overachiever, an A student, and you came prepared with your influencer challenge from the last time, and we're going to talk about that.
Yes.
So, and I'm quite certain you're probably taking copious notes here, but I'm just giving you a heads up. Pay attention to these 3 rules because I want to see how you're going to hear them and apply them to your challenge. So I'm excited to
Oh,
hear that here in
you
just a
are
few minutes.
testing me.
I know. But remember, Rule number one is start with a clarified measurable result, and it's all about the result. Then step number two is identifying what is the behavior that needs to be enacted to get that result. And then once we have the behavior, here's where the magic becomes is what are the six sources of influence? And I know that's not going to mean anything to anybody listening up to this point, but when we're done with all of the podcast, it will. What are the six sources of influence that that they can leverage to influence the vital behavior? And the cool thing is, these sources of influence are all around us all the time in every part of our day, and we're usually blind to them. And in fact, Vital Smarts has a really great video out on YouTube called Blind and Outnumbered. And I would encourage anybody to go look at that video. It's about a 7-minute video. It's fantastic. It talks all about these six sources of influence. But what really is telling about this model, and this is where we get back to nudge theory, is choice is the foundation of motivation. And we want to offer people choice, but again, we want to nudge them. And we get these nudges all around us every day, and we're blind to it most of the time. And what the science tells us with this model, we know that there's six sources of influence, but the more sources of influence you use aimed at the vital behavior, the more exponentially the result, or exponential or more likely you achieving your results are. So I'll give you a really simple one, and we won't cover this for several more podcasts, but this is my favorite source 6. So I'm really jumping ahead, but it's the environmental source. And everybody listening, I would encourage you to help me complete this sentence. And Constance, I'm going to call on you to help me complete this. Imagine you're out at dinner in a nice restaurant, and you're enjoying the dinner, and you get up to leave the table, tell your guest that you'll be right back, and you go to use the restroom. And you're in the restroom, and in there you notice there's a sign, and the sign reads, "All employees must
Wash hands.
wash hands."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the restaurant owner wants their employees to have clean hands. That's the net result they want. The behavior they need to do it is make sure they wash their hands. So there's a source of influence, i.e., what we call that a structural source, to influence that behavior at moment in time, which is critical for after you use the restroom. So again, these sources of influence are all around us, but becoming awakened and realizing how we can use those sources to influence the behavior and ultimately the result we want is really the key to this series, or number two, this podcast, those three things. So number one, again, what's the number one step we want to do?
The first thing we want to do is have clarifying measurable result.
Yeah, we want to define it. What's the result we really want? Well done. What's the step number two?
So step two is to have a time frame, like set a date, right?
No. So setting a date is part of the clarified measurable result. So defining that result. Step two is really about, remember, the behavior.
Find the behavior. Okay.
Yeah, we want to find the vital behavior, and not just any behavior, but what is the 1 to 2 key behaviors that, if enacted, will lead to the result that we want. And then the third step is what?
Influences, sources of influence.
Yeah, learning to apply the forces of influence towards the vital behavior to get what we really want or get the result. All right. So now you've listened to the podcast. You feel super confident. Well, I know I'm putting words in your mouth, and that's not sanitary, but I'm asking, do you feel really confident? Are you ready to try your challenge?
I think I want to try it. Yeah.
Okay. So we won't talk about necessarily the use of any of the sources of influence. If you want to go for bonus points, you can. But let's first unpack the clarified measurable result. So before we dive in, tell us what your challenge is. Remind the listeners what the challenge is again from your perspective.
Right. So the first in the first podcast of this series, we talked about the overview, and we talked about all of these influencers and things like that. And I said that I really would love for my son to wash his dishes, to
Yes.
put his dishes in the dishwasher, very specifically.
Mm-hmm.
When he gets up from the table, I want him to just automatically think, I should put this in the dishwasher. So he's a good roommate, right?
Okay.
So I'd like him to do that, and I would very much like that to happen in the next 2 weeks if I could make it so.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat this back to you. Let me see if I'm hearing this
Yes,
right. So your clarified or measurable result is to have your son put the dishes in the dishwasher after eating every time
every
within the next
time.
2 weeks.
Yes,
Okay, I think that'll work. Now,
I hope so.
well, you're down the path. You've at least defined what the result is that you want. Now that
Yes.
you defined it, what are the vital behaviors that you think that would be critical?
Vital behaviors would be, gosh, now, so I'm thinking about influencers though. I'm thinking I want to hang a big sign in the kitchen.
See, you're jumping
I'm
right ahead
jumping
trying to use
right
it.
ahead. Yes, I know, I know. Um, the vital behavior is the act of him actually either, washing the dish and putting it in the washer
Okay.
versus just leaving it in the sink.
Okay. And that's a little bit of the result that you want. So I kind of had a
Oh, see,
feeling.
this is hard.
I know, but I kind of had a feeling that you might, that might be the answer I got. So I planned ahead. I have a bonus for you. I'm going to actually share a story with you. I
Okay.
had another friend that was in a similar situation, but this gentleman was a male, and he's like, "Hey," um, and he was like all of us. He was really dedicated to his work, and he worked a lot, and he had a wife and kids, and but he's like, my relationships with both of them aren't really as good as they need to be. And he's like, I really want to try to use this tool to improve that. And so I said, okay. And so we talked about why he thought that was. And he's like, well, um, here's what happens. He's like, I work late. I come home from work. My wife's usually in the kitchen cooking when I get home because I get home close to dinner time. Because my goal is I want to eat with my family, and I believe that if I eat with my family, that I'll have better relationships. But usually, I beat dinner home, and it's not quite done yet. So I'll go into my office, and like anybody else, I probably have a few emails that I need to um, get to, and I really go to my office to set my bag down. And but since I've got time, I pull out my laptop and I start and then I get really focused. And then 10 minutes turns into 2 hours and I end up missing dinner. And I said, does that happen often? And I said, it does. He's like, my wife and kids are understanding and they're patient about it. They understand it, but I feel like it's really causing problems. So very similar to you, he knew what he wanted. He's like, I want to be at the dinner table eating. And but I said, okay, here's what I want you to do. I said, you just need to do one thing because I focused on the behavior. So, what is the behavior that this individual is doing? And I said, where is your in proximity to the office or into the kitchen? Where is your office? And he said, it's down the hall and to the right. I said, okay. I said, what I want you to do is your vital behavior literally is not going right, but going left or straight into the kitchen. So when you get home and you're at that point in your house, that one spot in your house, I want you to say the new spot for my bag isn't my office. It's pick a chair in the kitchen and set your bag in the chair in the kitchen. And I
Mm.
said, do that for a month and get back to me. And in a month's time, he came back to me and he said, I can't believe it. He said, everything's changed. He's like, I have a better relationship with my kids. I have a much better relationship with my wife, both emotionally and physically, if you know what I mean. I said, I understand what you're saying, friend. And so he said, things are significantly better. And I said, fantastic. And it all happened because he decided to not go right, but go left. The behavior was walk into the kitchen, not walk into the uh, office.
Office.
And a lot of times we try to overanalyze this vital behavior step, and it's really critical to just think about what is the behavior. And behavior can be emotional, it can be physical, it can be both. Just think of it as a process flow, though. So let's go back to your son now with the dishwasher and think about you're at the dinner table. What is the process flow, both maybe from a thoughtful perspective, because you'd mentioned you wanted to think about it, but also a physical perspective, like what's the path maybe that he walks down? And then how is that going to maybe help you diagnose what the behavior needs to be?
Well, so I guess I'm thinking of it now. I'm thinking of the process, and I have a monkey wrench. Well, in my mind it is, but so we'll see what you think. So if we are setting an example and we get up and do this act, then I'm thinking that that would be setting the example for the behavior to for him to follow. However, here comes the monkey wrench, is that my husband is a stay-at-home dad and he takes care of the dishes all the time. He cooks, he does the cleaning, he does everything, right? So my son just assumes that someone else is going to pick up after him and do it. So that's my monkey wrench. That's where I'm getting hung up in my brain. So I know that we can influence the behavior by setting that example and that we would all do
So
it, but I'm still stuck on this behavior.
no, you're not stuck. I am so glad you're responding this way because your mind is going right to the solution. And I need you to remember the goal of this podcast, of this course, is to give you a brand new brain. You're thinking what I would consider your old framework. The new framework is just simply simplify, get rid of all the backstory you just shared with you, which is highly relevant, and it'll come
Hmm.
into play when we look at the different sources in the next step. But diagnose what's the behavior that's needed in order for him to go to the dishwasher.
He
Is your
needs,
table, is your dishwasher behind your table? Is it, in front of your table? Where is it physically located? Is it,
it's
is it
in the next room. So
in the
the,
next room?
yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So what you need him to do is to walk into the kitchen.
Yeah.
That's the behavior you need.
Oh,
Okay.
that's it.
That's it. I know,
I'm thinking 5 steps ahead here.
you are, but that's, I remember when I first started, we started last podcast. I've literally taught this to hundreds, probably maybe even close to 1,000 people, and interacting with all of them. Um, that is a very common thought process that you're going through, and I'm glad that it's coming out in this podcast because we needed to say the vital behavior in your case, because like in my house, my kitchen table, I have an open concept kitchen, the kitchen table and the dishwasher together. What I'm hearing you say is it's in another room. So the vital behavior for you, much like the other my gentleman friend I told you about, that you need him to physically walk into the kitchen.
Mhm.
And with a high likelihood, I will tell you, if he walks into the kitchen, he's going to go ahead and go into the dishwasher. So I know you're nodding. I see you nodding your head. I,
Nope.
I, I bet you we'll have to have a
Drops it
little.
right in the sink.
All right, we'll see. We'll see about that. We'll work with
Okay.
that. So on your challenge, I want you to, for the vital behavior, I want you to write, um, walk into the kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah. And then source number three, which was what? Remind me what source number three is?
The 6 sources of influence.
Yeah, the 6 sources of influence. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a hall pass on that one. You don't have to try to fill that in yet because I want to give all of our listeners context as to what those are, and we'll apply those along the way, and we'll do that source by source. But
Okay.
yeah, for those listening, and in closure, and I'll turn it back over to Constance for closure. But just remember, influencers do 3 things. And if you do these 3 things well, start with a clarified, measurable result, identify the vital behavior, and then utilize this 6 sources of influence to enact that behavior, you will become significantly more profound, if you will, in your ability to influence your behavior in yourself and others. Last podcast, I talked about the example that, and I'll continue to weave this throughout as well, is the vitals signs monitor using that in a decline engagement. And in this particular case, when I worked with that client, and remember the goal was for them, their clarified measurable result that they wanted, if we're looking at our model, was to reduce sepsis in their organization by 20% over the next 6 months. That was their goal. And we're going to talk about how they got to that goal in the next series. But then their vital behavior, literally, this is how easy it was. Again, they were using the Cerner Welch Allyn interface, but it was scan the badge, scan the patient badge, and hit the send button. So they had three vital behaviors, and they knew if they did those, if they just did those behaviors, their likelihood to reduce sepsis was going to be significantly better. And I'm happy to report, I don't want to spoil it, but they did. They achieved the result. It was really profound. But you'll hear me unpack that along the way. But it's always really good to connect these tools back to the nursing community. So thank you for the reminder.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I think this particularly is going to make people think about just about everything that they're doing. And I bet after people are listening to this, they're going to go back into work and they're going to be thinking, what's the vital behavior?
I hope they do.
Everybody's going to be so focused on it. Well, this is so fun. I can't wait until we talk about the next one, Bruce. This is excellent content, and I'm sure we'll be able to use it not only in our daily lives, but in our work lives as well. So thanks. Can't wait to see you again.
All right. Until the next one.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you'll join us again for another session of Informatically Speaking.
This has been a production of the Greater Delaware Valley chapter of the American Nursing Informatics Association. For more information about the GDV-ANIA chapter, visit us at community.ania.org/Greater Delaware Valley/home.